an important conversation on race and the riots in Portland, Oregon, coming up on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone. I am going to make this episode of the podcast quite a bit longer than usual, and here's why. I had a half-hour discussion the other day with a black pastor in Portland, Oregon, who we had a great conversation about race and race relations and these riots and what needs to be done, and most importantly, how we can pray for that situation. And one of the things that always bugs me about my job is that I get these great interviews and then I have to boil it down in a news feature to just a few seconds, just a few little sound bites. And so it's almost impossible for me to give you the correct picture of what this person said, because I'm only showing you what I want you to see of what they said, and a very little bit of it at that. So one of the reasons I started this podcast was to be able to give you a fuller picture of what's actually going on. And so that's what I'm going to do today. This is Pastor JW Matt Hennessee. And great guy, really enjoyed my talk with him. We obviously are on different sides of several issues that we talk about here, but I want you to hear his side of it and what he had to say in its entirety, uncut, with all the blemishes. So here goes. What are the difficulties for Christians in Portland in approaching these issues? And there are many.
That's right.
There's the federal agents down at the courthouse. There's the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes.
And even the tension and the misunderstandings, I think, between the Black Lives Matter as an organization and the whole,
That's right.
They're very good at marketing. I mean, who can disagree with Black Lives Matter?
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
I mean, I don't know anybody who would disagree with that.
Right.
But when you look into the organization, it's a whole different thing.
It's very different.
Yeah. So,
that's right.
well, if you were explaining this to somebody who was just fresh coming here, how would you explain what's going on right now?
I would say that this is a confluence of a number of different things that are happening. First of all, this is not, pre-COVID and, pre-George Floyd. This wasn't the most churched area in the first place. Mm-hmm. So for Christians, this has always been a very difficult place to live. While you can enjoy the outside, you can enjoy so many wonderful things in terms of our natural beauty. It's always been difficult because we're competing at all times as Christians with the various attractions there are to living in Portland, Oregon. So getting people to church on Sunday morning is not the easiest thing in the world. I have noted that as one who is an associate pastor for 16 years here and now a senior pastor for 15. But given the situation we have now, life is a little bit more complicated on the one hand because of the confluence of whether it's Black Lives Matter, the federal people are here, the distrust with police, the issues of unarmed black people and brown people and indigenous people losing their lives on the street, the terrible recognition, if you will, of the knee to George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and the look of that, which was basically without any sort of change in his countenance as people were trying to encourage him to get off of Mr. Floyd's neck. And what that did, that picture did, is give us all a look at what hatred, what injustice, what racism, what anything coming close to privilege looks like. It's basically, I don't care what you're saying. I'm where I am, and I'll put my hands in my pocket, and I'll keep doing this, even though I hear the cries from the crowd and the cries from Mr. Floyd as well. I think that what also happened is it reminded us of the importance of being able to see the portrayal. Because if this had just been verbal, it would not have had the same impact.
Yeah,
But because of the video brought everything home, and it shamed us as a country to say, we've been living with this for how long? And we've been allowing this to happen. And we've got Christian institutions, we've got business institutions, we've got neighborhoods, we've got the individuals who are saying, this is ugly. And actually, this reconciliation of race should have come a long time ago. Lot has been handed down, and we really need to do something about it now.
So, I mean, since that happened, I've not. There probably are people out there who don't think it was a problem, but I haven't met any. I mean, that cop and that situation have been roundly condemned from every quarter across the nation, without exception that I can find. The officers are facing justice. They were immediately arrested and charged, and they'll go through the wheels of justice. How do you think? So I mean, I think that, like, everybody's in agreement by this, but yet we're still seeing people burning down neighborhoods across this country.
Yes.
Do you think that that's detracted from the overall, progress that could have been made here? The violence that we've seen. What is it that causes these people to just rampage? And I'm not saying black people. I'm saying, because here there wasn't mostly. It's
not at all.
No, it's not.
No.
And what is it that makes that happen?
I sense what it is, Chuck, is more pent up emotion that has been there for a long time. And this is a way to express it. Again, I come out of a total belief in peace and nonviolence. I don't understand violence. I really don't, because, I've lived through a number of things as a person who grew up in foster homes and orphan homes, quite frankly. And I've lived and worked various places around the world. But I've always believed in the importance of how we connect with one another as brothers and sisters. But when people begin to respond that way, they respond that way much like the Rodney King era, or what happened right after the O.J. Simpson trial. This, in my view, is sort of lockstep with that. There is rage in here that people have had to harness, and now here's an opportunity to get it out. Does it harm the message? The answer is yeah, it does. It really does, because what it does is it distracts people, no different than what I saw last night when I was on the street with a couple of people who basically said, Pastor, we're not going to let you go by yourself, right? So we broke up a couple of fights, and there was a white guy that I still see his face and I still hear him, because there was a group of black kids that somehow got into a skirmish with a white young lady. And I don't know what the issue was about, but I immediately put myself in the middle of it and stopped them from fighting her anymore. And the man said, see there, that's what they're like. They talk about Black Lives Matter. How do Black Lives matter? If that's what Black Lives Matter is all about, I don't want any part of that. All lives matter. And that's what the man actually said, right? What he was telling me is that what he saw was the epic understanding of what he's probably been raised with. And it's been handed down to him that that's the way black people act. All right, that's my interpretation as a black man.
Right.
I didn't say anything to stop him. I didn't try to calm him. I didn't try to redirect him, correct him, anything. I wasn't proud of what I saw. I thought it was wrong, which is exactly why I went over and stopped it and helped the young lady up off the ground and helped her collect the stuff that they had thrown around.
So why not ascribe your actions to black people rather than what those other guys would,
Right. No, he did. Yeah. And by the way, that's the funny thing. That is the funny thing. He didn't say a word about what I did at all. It was about what they did.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I was telling your secretary this. I think that we very often we don't argue with each other. We argue at each other. We argue at a caricature of
Yes.
each other. We have something in our mind that isn't the reality, but that's what we think it is.
Yeah.
And it's this distorted, kind of cartoonish version of reality that we're actually fighting against. And if
Yeah.
we could actually see each other as we really are, there wouldn't be a fight. I think that and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that everybody agrees that Black Lives Matter. I mean, I'm sure there are people who don't think so, but
Yeah.
virtually everybody in this country believes that.
But you know where I'd argue with you is that today, so 4 years ago when Black Lives Matter started,
Say that again.
4 years ago when Black Lives Matter started, I promise you there were a bunch of people that didn't like it. I certainly heard that around here a lot. And I have to say, I was as complicit. I would say, in fact, I was walking with a march of young people we must have gone 8 miles. From this side of town to that side of town to back and all that. But I stayed right with them because they asked me to come and be a part of it. And as long as I towed their line when they asked me to pray, which I did when they wanted to stop and rest for a moment, I said, Black Lives Matter, all cool. When I said, let's not forget our goal is to go and make sure that we have all lives matter, then they were ready to shut me down because they felt at that moment that I was disrespecting the importance of the foundation of what Black Lives Matter meant. Not the ethos that you see of these 13 things that they believe in, but it's their message was, and they felt I was diluting it. And I had to learn that, and I have come to where we are today, 4 years later. And it was, if there is enough understanding of the dismantling of the racism that has held Black people down in this country, that if that is lifted, then all boats lift. And that's really what it's all about. And again, today, I absolutely agree with you. Everyone understands. And I think the George Floyd moment, his unfortunate killing, helped people understand that. But I also would say 3 to 4 years ago, and before that, I think there were many people who took issue with that. Because don't forget that part of what we're dealing with is a backlash of a Black president. That there were many people who felt that we, quote, gave you a Black president, so you guys ought to be happy now. And that's a reality. And I say that as a Black man. Sure. I say that as a pastor. Yeah. I've heard those words. It's not. Right. I'm telling you something I was told. I'm telling you I heard those words.
I mean, that would be a really, to me, that somebody saying that would be a very disrespectful and condescending, sort of elitist thing.
Yeah.
We elected a Black president, but the fact that he had darker skin, he was mixed race,
right,
is irrelevant.
Right.
They elected a guy. Now, I mean, was he elected simply because of the color of his skin? That would be a very disrespectful thing to say.
And you know what? My take on that, because if you really look at it, Senator Obama, his resume was pretty thin, quite frankly.
Yeah,
and it took me a while to really come to, this guy wants to be president, but he really hasn't been in elected office for very long. And the largest claim to fame he has is in community organizing. I honestly believe that his election was as, I say analogous to President Carter's election. President Carter came right after Watergate, and people saying, we want that chapter to close.
It was a cathartic thing.
Because it was cathartic is a good word. Because again, I love President Carter, loved his ethos. Again, I was a kid, the first time I could vote was his second, run against, President Reagan. But I liked him because he was a Christian. I liked that he was open about his Christianity and all that stuff, right? And I felt as much, and by the way, gratefully, I had a relationship with President Bush and Mrs. Bush because of my relationship with Condoleezza Rice. So, I appreciated them as people. I appreciated what he tried to do, but I also recognized with the banking issue that occurred and all that stuff, John McCain didn't have a chance. And yet again, a decent man,
Of course.
right?
Yeah, right.
And so
For those days again.
there you go.
Yeah.
But I think it's because of that. And then once he was elected, if we go back in the annals of history, people were beginning to say we're in a post-racial era in America. There was nothing post-racial about us as a country.
The strange thing to me, and I was telling Pastor or Bishop Tyson about this, that I feel like there are two countries that live in America, and they don't mix much. They really can't. They're kind of mutually exclusive, and I live in one, and in large part you live in another.
Yeah.
And before Barack Obama got elected, this doesn't have anything to do with what we're
It's
talking
okay.
about, but it's
No worries.
interesting.
Yeah.
Before
Yeah.
Barack Obama got elected, I'd walk down the street and you'd see people, and it would never occur to you that guy's probably a Democrat or that guy's probably a Republican.
Yeah.
But after Barack Obama, and because it was kind of the first election. It wasn't the first election I voted in because I was a young man and didn't care about politics before
Yeah.
that. It's the first election where I really cared about politics. And I disagreed so vehemently with Barack Obama's stand on things. Absolutely nothing to do with the
Understood.
melanin content of
Yeah.
his skin.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was for murdering babies,
Yeah.
the fact that is you didn't earn that statement, really rubbed me the wrong way. The idea that it's bad for me to earn money, but it's good for you to take my money and give it to somebody who didn't earn it.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've vehemently disagreed with him on those issues. And so after that election, walking down the street, if I saw an African American, immediately my brain would say, that guy probably voted for that.
Of course.
And I didn't like it.
Right.
And
I
and so it
understand that.
made me more racist.
I respect that.
I'd say that to my shame.
Yeah. I
But
understand.
it made me more racist
Yeah.
after he got elected. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate. I in 2012 had a conversation with a guy that's kind of a futurist, and he actually predicted where we are right now.
Wow.
But what he didn't predict was that it would be the schism would be along racial lines.
Yeah.
He predicted it'd be along economic lines. But wow, fascinating discussion. I'd love to talk to you more about that.
We can
Actually,
talk more
I got a
about
great
that.
idea, but
Yeah.
we'll talk about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's talk about what you saw last night.
Yeah.
Tell me what you saw, and from your perspective, what it meant.
There are a few things. So I would say that what I saw was, on the one hand, a large gathering of people who were certainly very like-minded. I saw people coming together as if it was kind of like a family reunion. There were, in fact, people in tents. There were people handing out free water. There were people who had free clothing and stuff like that they were offering. There were people huddled together. There were people certainly paying attention to the stage where, the many chants and everything else was going on. And what was interesting for me was to listen, because that's one of the things that I've tried to do during this entire period is, as a leader, I'm often asked to speak. And during this entire period, I've said, I just want to listen. I want to show up. There are times when I have to speak, right? But I just really want to show up and hear, because sometimes I'm realizing that my worldview is not the worldview of a 25-year-old. That's all there is to it. And,
I hope not.
yeah, I mean, it's like I sense that violence is not the way. They sense I don't really care. I am against that institution. I'm against capitalism. I'm against whatever it is, right? And I'm learning to just understand that's the way it is. When I was growing up, we were against apartheid in South Africa. We were against racial inequality and things of that nature, right? But the other thing that, and this was a poignant moment for me, is that while I was walking this past Sunday, I joined because I was asked by the head of the police union to come up and speak because they tried to burn down their building on Sunday, right? So the police union president said, I'm gathering some community members. I really like you, Pastor Hennessy, if you will come and speak. And so I did, and I can send it to you if you want to look at it, unless you saw it already.
No, I haven't seen it, but I'd like to.
Okay, I'll be happy to send it to you. One of the people on a bike recognized that it was me, and he said, Pastor Hennessy, he said, lots of us have watched you, lots of us respect you. He happened to be a Caucasian guy. He said, but I want you to know that some of us were very upset with you by your words on Sunday. And I said, help me understand what you mean. He said, we heard you. There were many of us who were peaceful in demonstrating. And in fact, we were trying to stop those that were violent. He said, but what I assumed you were saying, and I appreciate the fact that he said I assumed, you were saying is that you wanted to stop everything, do a moratorium on all the demonstration on the street and all that. And I said, thank you for saying that. I said, actually, that's not what I said. What I said is that people should peacefully protest. I said, but I had some real concerns about the violent protest. And I said, I asked for a moratorium to violent protests because I asked for an opportunity for us to sit and talk. We'll meet you anywhere. Help us understand what it is you are seeking and what it is we need to do to stop the violence.
Did you get the sense that there was an element in last night's protest that has no interest in talking about anything?
There is no question about that. And so part of how we ended this conversation is I told him, I said, let me just say to you, I apologize for offending you or offending anybody and for othering, because he felt like part of the problem was me saying yes for peaceful, no for violence. And I said, I get it. What you're saying is I'm not trying to conflate what you're all out here for. You're out here for the same thing, but some of you are demonstrating differently than others, right? But in terms of where we go from here, I think there's a big problem with trying to figure out exactly what it will take or what needs to be done to really stop all of the stuff that we see happening, and the ability for people to just really say, we've got to bridge this gap. Because what is this gap? There's a huge trust and credibility gap here. Nothing that the police do is going to be respected, appreciated, because of this long history that people see as being mistrustful. And we've got to figure out how we go from lack of trust, period, lack of believability, period. And there are some good reasons for that. I mean, I served at one point as a public safety leader in Saginaw, Michigan. So I led police and fire. When I was a student at Oberlin, I was working in the police bureau. I was a city manager in Ypsilanti, Michigan. So I've worked the police route and respect and appreciate that there are times we do good work and there are times that we didn't do good work. And we've got to own and accept that. Sure. But the other thing we have to do is really own and accept the fact that we as citizens don't always do our part right either. And that as we are looking for accountability, we've got to make sure that we are accountable as well.
You mentioned that this credibility gap is so wide at this point. How do we bridge that? How do we fix it?
I think it's honestly it's an event of inches. Right after Ferguson, I gathered a group that still meets every other Friday called the Interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative. I said, I want to bring as many people of faith to the table, business to the table, community to the table, law enforcement to the table. And this was right after, I said, because I don't want our city to blow up the way Ferguson, Dallas, Baltimore, you name it, around the country. I said, I really want us to figure out how we can work together. And the only way we can do that is get in the room together, fight with each other sometimes, but really try to get to learn and understand one another. And every other Friday for 4 years now, we've done that. We meet at North Precinct. Even during COVID, we're meeting virtually right now, right? But what are we doing? To get back to your question, it is that this credibility gap is so wide because we haven't found the way to really give each other grace to come inches by inches, by inches, by inches toward one another. What our experience has shown is that the more we are involved and in relationship with each other, the more we have the opportunity to learn from each other and recognize that there are times when some of our biases that we walk in the room with, on the one hand, can crumble with better knowledge and understanding. On the other hand, some of it will not. But what I've witnessed and what we've witnessed, because they're usually about anywhere between, depending on the Friday, because remember, we're all volunteers. We're doing this because we believe in it. So between 40 and 50 people or so will get in a room or more, and we will literally duke it out in some time. And by the way, our police chiefs have been right in the room. We've had 4 of them in the last 4 years. They've all been there.
Does that lead you to greater respect and of those guys?
There's no question.
Yeah.
No question about it.
So, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, there's the organization and then there's the idea, and those two things are not the same. How do you address that as a black pastor?
I really address it from the standpoint of what is the ethos, what is the point. Not necessarily, because I just had a conversation with a white evangelical pastor who said, I've got a real problem with this because of all these things. I said, I went back to my seminary training, and I remember so well one of my professors telling me that there are times when what we have to do in parsing what we do and understanding what we are led here and called by God to do is that we must look at what is the most salient and important thing. And sometimes we have to understand that there's certain parts of this I may not like, but this part I really do care about.
But do you feel like that sort of distracts from the actual objective? Because you would have a hard time, I think, finding very many people who would say, I don't think that we should assert that Black Lives Matter. But at least in the country I live in, you're going to have a hard time finding anybody who agrees with the mission of BLM, the organization.
Totally understood. What I like about it is that I've got a choice. And that's what I suggest to people, is that you've got a choice. And the choice you have is to say, this is why I support Black Lives Matter. This is, by the way, what I don't support, right? I'm that way with my children. I love you, but there's some behavior you have that I don't support. But I'm not going to unson you. I'm not going to undaughter you because I don't like these behaviors. I love you not just because I helped bring you in the world. I love you because I believe in you. And I believe in my work as a pastor, as a father, a grandfather, is that my job is to pray for all that other stuff. Because what I believe is that God is greater, stronger, and has a far more ability to correct a lot of this other stuff than I do.
Amen.
And that what my job is to focus on the core of what's occurring here. So for instance, when you look at Black Lives Matter, that's one thing. I'll take you to a conversation I had about a cop who a few years ago got up out of a roll call and said, let's go shoot some N-words, right? That's what he said out in front of his fellow officers, a sergeant. And when that word got back to me, by the way, he got suspended and all that other kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
But here's what I said to the chief. I said, first of all, let's be proud of the fact that today, 15 people came to you and said, this is what this guy said, and it's not right. Because 15 years ago, or less, that might have been said. Nobody would have said anything. I said, so I'm grateful for that. Secondly, I would actually not like to see this person fired. And he looked at me and I said, no, I'm serious about that. I said, because what I sense is that sometimes we get too emotional about what we hear. I said, when I was 17 years old, the only kid who graduated from high school in the orphan home, a woman who had to sign my papers for me to go to Oberlin College said, an N-word doesn't have a right to go to Oberlin College. I said, and interestingly enough, I know that it was nothing but God that came right down in the middle of that conversation, because my response to her was, I don't know what an N-word is, but I'm going to Oberlin College. And I just grinned. She signed my paper. She threw it at me, and I walked out the door. And quite frankly, in those next 4 years, there were times when I was totally overwhelmed. But every time I got overwhelmed and felt like quitting, I could see her face. And I said, she is not winning. So I said to them about this sergeant, I said, here's an opportunity, because that came from inside him and inside his lived experience. I said, what I'd love to do is really work with him. I said, if he's remorseful, why don't we use our Christian values and give him an opportunity to repent for what he said?
So that's the last most important question. How do we as believers come together and pray for what's happening in Portland today?
I think that what we have to do, and what we... Okay? As Christians, it's important to me that we, on the one hand, can feel...
Just making sure the audio is right.
No worries. It's important to me as Christians, one, that we can feel the emotion of the moment. I've had white people walk into our church who've never been here before, and just walked in. I didn't call them, right? But we have a mixed congregation, as mixed as one can be. We didn't go out and do all this stuff, but people would come in the door and say, you know what, I'm just ashamed to be a white person. Pastor Hennessee, I really appreciate the fact that you have really put yourself out front, and that, quite frankly, we want to do some things and we don't know what to do. I have no problem with all that. I really don't. But I'm not trying to shame you further as a brother or sister. What I say is that, by the way, this is where we are. Now let's begin to work together. Number one, it's important for us as Christians, even if we don't understand, for us to try to have empathy for what we see. Even empathy for what we see that we don't like. Because part of what I am also doing as a Christian is saying, I'm a lover of nonviolence. I have trouble with people who set fires on purpose, for people who write graffiti all over the place and stuff like that, who bash in windows and loot stores. I have a real problem with all of that. But that's why inside I'm saying, Lord, you've got to help me understand what that person sees that I don't, what that person feels that I don't feel. That's the first place. The second, the second place is that however we land emotionally, we must understand that we have to get to the place of really saying, Lord, this is more than what I can handle. It goes back to, how Jehoshaphat had to have felt in 2 Chronicles 20 when they said, hey, all these armies are heading up this way, brother, and they're going to take you out. And Jehoshaphat looks at them and says, Lord, we know that we're skilled, but this is bigger than we can handle. Our eyes are on you. And in my view, this is one of those moments where our eyes must be on God, must be on the power, the blood of Jesus Christ to really help us to really get through this moment.
What specifically can we pray for?
I think we, number one, need to pray for understanding. We need to pray for the ability to listen, to learn, and to find out how God wants us to engage. And to do that in a very, very, intentional way. For us to be able to be used by God as instruments in this space and in this hour to say that we want to do what we can to help. And the last thing I'd say is exactly what I said to this interfaith group just a few moments before you and I start talking. I said, we need to remember that all of us, 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be a whole new group of faces that are going to be here doing this leadership work, doing this, dealing with and, confronting whatever is going on. Our job right now, as we think about how we pray to God, is let's pray about Him using us in a way, and for us to be willing to be used in a way that we can leave our legacy and our space greater and better than we found it, and to recognize that many who came before us that we revere, they were faced with different set of circumstances, but the same sort of process.
Would you hope that what changes would you hope to see between the people and the police?
What I'd love to see is the ability for the police bureaus to have more people in them that are civilian. Part of what I loved, I was never a sworn officer. I was a civilian, but I had wide authority because I was the public safety director. So more people in the police bureau. I want to change law enforcement and policing to peacekeeping, because the reality is that's really what we need them to do, is help us keep the peace. And I want to toss out police. I want to toss out the terms law enforcement, period. The next thing I want is for us to learn from one another and do disruptive training so that as citizens and as officers, we can learn and understand where our lived experiences have brought us. That's important.
I can see where that would make a lot of sense in many cases, domestic violence, child abuse.
You got it, all that.
That doesn't work when there's a terror attack. That doesn't work when there's a mass shooter.
This is the important thing. So my thought is there's a certain part of the Bureau and things that they do that needs to be separate from what other citizens can actually do.
I think that's very efficient.
But that in other, when you talk about the hard issues of confronting violence, keeping, dealing with terrorism and, other issues like that, that to me is what they're for. And let's make sure that we give them all the training, all the skill, everything else to make sure that happens. But I honestly believe that there's a lot of interfacing that needs to go on. For instance, I said when I went to school at Eastmore High School in Columbus, my principal knew that if there was a problem in the lunchroom, out in the yard, in the parking lot or something, all he had to do is reach out to about 10 of us, probably same for you, and say, by the way, would you do me a favor and go take care of that? We would go take care of that. Student leaders in schools can do that, right? The mass shooter, that's what our police force and the federal forces and others need to be skilled and trained to do.
That makes sense. I mean, it'd be much more efficient that way, probably be more cost effective that way, because when you take your typical cop who has to be trained to do all of those things, that's a lot of money in training.
Yeah.
He can be a jack of all trades and a master of none.
That's exactly right.
We could have people that are masters of social, dealing with the domestics or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, if they're not somewhat trained in the righteous application of violence, they're going to become another victim if they go to many of those calls.
Exactly.
So there's got to be some. But
yeah.
Like in Panama, they have transit police that give speeding tickets, and they have other cops that fight crime. They're two different things, and different pay grades and different training.
You got it.
It's
That's
more
right.
efficient.
It's that kind of stuff I'm talking about. Yeah. And by the way, now what have you got? You've got citizens and police. You have civilians and police actually working together. Right? They now understand each other a heck of a lot better. And I honestly believe it begins to break down a whole lot of walls.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.